Romeo HQ. Hello, Mr. Dixon. George R. Martin. I think he has 2 R's in his name. I think the second R stands for royalties. George R. R. Martin once said that there are 2 kinds of writers. The architect, who always plan the whole story ahead. There's the gardener, who plants their plots and characters and let them grow naturally by themselves. I wonder which of those kinds you are. Thank you for your incredible work. Well, thank you for the kind words. Look, when people say there's 2 kinds of anything in the world, don't listen to them. It's never just 2 kinds of anything. It's the human race, especially when you're dealing with a product of the human mind, which is what writing is. And it's the product of a particular part of the human mind, the imagination, which is limitless. It's boundless. So there's not 2 kinds. There's many ways to approach the writer's quote-unquote process. There's as many ways to write a story as there are people who want to write a story. Now, which kind of writer am I, or what kind of writer am I? I'm a little bit of architect. I'm a little bit of gardener. It depends on the story. When I write my bad times novels, my time travel stories, they're what I call my toy soldier stories. So I take my cast of characters and I move them through a series of historical events that I've made up. And a lot of times I'm not clear where I'm going. I just have a high concept and a general idea of where the book's going to end. But I just set everything in motion and I go for it. So that's gardening. The Levon Cade novels, I'll do chapter breakdowns and things like that. I'll do, a rudimentary outline, if you could call it that. It's basically just write down the chapter numbers and some hastily scribbled notes to just sort of make sure I got a story before I start. So it's not really an architect. You wouldn't want to build a house based on my architect drawings, done in the style of Levon Cade outlines. So I'm a little bit of both, but mostly I'm a big scene guy. Raymond Chandler was a big scene guy, although he didn't worry about plot as much as I do. Chandler would come up with 3 good scenes, and then just letting his imagination roam, and then figure out a way to get Phil Marlowe to those scenes, and so that they had emotional impact to the story, so that they happened in a logical way. They didn't seem contrived, and he succeeded in all of them, except in the end his plots were a mess. But you enjoyed reading it. You enjoyed being along for the ride because the writing is just so skilled and funny and clever. And his pacing was terrific. Even if he was going nowhere, the pacing was great. Now, a guy I know who is primarily a gardener type is Larry Hama. Larry believes in his characters so much. He builds them in his mind until they're real people, and that he just sends them out there in the world. He creates a complication for them, and then they overcome it. Now, he worries about plot, and he worries about story structure. I mean, Larry knows all that stuff. Character development, how to build the scene, and all the rest of it. But he's pretty much, just let it fly. And that's the way he enjoys working, and the end result, look at the characters he created. People love those characters. They love G.I. Joe. So he's right to have a lot of faith that those characters can carry a story. And he comes up with, wacky, crazy stuff. And I think that's how he keeps it fresh in his mind. He's not getting bored because he's not plotting it all out ahead of time. Now, a writer that I know who's very much an architect, from discussions with him, is John Ostrander. John Ostrander will lay out his whole story, every event. He'll know exactly where he's going. But John Ostrander is a big world builder. And if you're going to build anything, you need architectural plans. And he's very much aware of that. John will even do very, very detailed full biographies of all of his characters, even if little or none of that information will actually end up in the story. He feels that it gives him a better understanding of character. That's how he makes the character real in his mind. I don't ever do that. I just sort of blue sky it. I just sort of like, okay, I think I got a handle on this character. I like this character. I understand what they would do and what they wouldn't do. But, John, and it just depends on who you are and what kind of person you are, the elements used. But you can, do all of those things, architect, gardening, making it up as you go along, just blue skying, writing the story like poetry. As P.G. Wodehouse said, his writing was a musical comedy without the music. So there's just so many different ways to do it. And then sometimes a story just comes to you whole. And I've had that. When that does, it's just, if you didn't believe in God before then, you do afterwards. Because it's like, this whole story comes to me like a bolt out of the blue. I have a mini-series coming up next year from Antarctic that I co-wrote with Scott Beatty called Unprepped. And the plot line of this 6-issue mini-series came to me all at once. It was like within 10 minutes of hastily scribbled notes, I had the whole thing down. The basic bones of the story. I knew how it was going to end. I knew how it was going to begin. I knew the character relationships. I knew everything going in. And then I brought Scott Beatty in to, make sure I wasn't crazy. And we did our, back and forth organic, I'm going to write you into a corner kind of writing, which is a different process. I'd write him into a corner. He'd write me into a corner. And we, work through it that way. Very organic process. So again, there's yet another way of working. And, but that's rare. The NOM 66, issue number 66, which I mention often, came to me like in a fever dream. Like kaboom, I've got this whole story. And I sat down and wrote 22 pages in one sitting. I didn't get up till it was done. I couldn't. I was just drawn into my own little freaky world that I thought of. But the whole story came to me. I knew everything that was going to happen in that story before I laid it down, which is unusual. It's very unusual. If there's a writer out there who writes like that all the time, God bless you, man. You are the luckiest person on earth, because most of the time I'm sitting here sweating. And, I realize I've written a lot, but every story you go into is like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this anymore. So there you go. Don't trust people who say there are just two kinds of anything. There's not just vanilla and chocolate. But that's, there you go. And for all of you would-be writers out there, don't think that there's some sort of, there's only two methods, or there's a true way, or there's a secret, or anything else. The only secret to writing is to just start writing. Just start writing, and then you rewrite. But just get a bunch of material down. Just start writing, just start telling your story. Even if it sucks, at least you've got some clay there to mold. You can go back and rewrite it and change it and see what you did wrong. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's the same as an artist. You're going to have a lot of crappy drawings behind you before you get better. It's the same with writing. And so don't get hung up on how-tos and processes and other authors' advice. Here I am, an author giving you advice. But my advice is to ignore all the advice and just start writing. Just start telling your story. Even if you've never written before and you have a story to tell, well, you have a story to tell. So tell it. Whatever way you can, whatever way suits your abilities or intent.